Wealthy CEO walked in on the nanny changing, and his life was never the same. The door swung open without warning. Mira froze, her uniform top halfway off, standing there in nothing but her delicate camisole. Her heart stopped as she locked eyes with the most powerful man in the city. Matthias Kane, billionaire CEO, her employer. And he was staring. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. Most women would have stammered, blushed, maybe even fainted. Not Mira Reyes. She snatched the nearest pillow, held it against herself, and her voice cut through the tension like a blade. Ever heard of knocking? Or do billionaires buy the right to invade people's privacy too? Matthias's jaw dropped. In all his years of commanding boardrooms and bending corporations to his will, no one, absolutely no one, had ever spoken to him like that. Especially not while half naked. I didn't know you were. Obviously. Mira A's eyes blazed with defiance, not an ounce of submission. Next time, try this revolutionary concept called respect for personal space. Matthias felt something he hadn't experienced in years. He was completely, utterly disarmed. Welcome back, my golden family, to my incredible subscribers. Thank you for making this channel a place where hearts connect and souls find hope. Your comments, your shares, your love keeps these stories burning bright. Now, let's get back to the story. Mira sat in her cramped studio apartment, staring at the red eviction notice taped to her door. 27 years old, college-educated, and completely broke. Her last nanny position had ended in disaster when the wealthy family accused her of stealing jewelry, a lie that destroyed her reputation overnight. Abuela, I don't know what else to do, Mira whispered into her phone, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. Her grandmother's weak cough echoed through the speaker. Mija, the treatments can wait. Don't worry about an old woman. But Mira was worried. The medical bills were crushing them both. Her grandmother's cancer treatments cost more than Mira made in 6 months, and insurance covered almost nothing. That's when her phone rang. Mira Reyes? This is Margaret from the Whitmore Agency. I have an emergency placement. High-profile family, immediate start, salary is, well, it's substantial. Mira's pulse quickened. How substantial? Enough to solve whatever financial crisis you're facing. But there's a catch. It's the Kane family. Matthias Kane specifically. His nephew needs care after a tragedy. Everyone knew the Kane name. Matthias Kane was on magazine covers, business headlines, society pages. His empire spanned 3 continents. His engagement to Vanessa Sinclair was scheduled to merge 2 of the wealthiest families in the country. Why me? Mira asked. After what happened at my last job. Because you're the only nanny I know who won't be intimidated by wealth. And frankly, you're the only one available on such short notice. Mira closed her eyes. Pride warred with desperation. She needed this job. Her grandmother needed those treatments. But working for someone like Matthias Kane meant entering a world where she'd never belong. What happened to the family? She asked quietly. Margaret's voice softened. Car accident. Both parents are gone. The little boy, he's been through hell. 3 nannies have quit already. He won't speak, won't eat properly. Mr. Kane is drowning trying to balance his business empire with suddenly becoming a guardian. Myra's heart clenched. A grieving child trumped her pride every time. I'll take it. 2 days later, Mira stood outside the Kane mansion, her worn suitcase feeling pathetic against the backdrop of marble columns and perfectly manicured gardens. The taxi driver whistled low as he drove away, leaving her alone before gates. The house wasn't just big, it was intimidating. Cold. Like a beautiful prison. You must be Mira, said a stern woman in an expensive suit, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I'm Mrs. Peterson, the house manager. Mr. Kane is in meetings until this evening, but I'll show you to your quarters and introduce you to Finn. As they walked through corridors lined with abstract art worth more than Myra's education, Mrs. Peterson rattled off rules. Meals are served at specific times. No personal calls during work hours. Mr. Kane values privacy and discretion above all else. And please, remember your position here. Mira bit back her response. She'd heard that tone before, the subtle reminder that she was staff, not family. Where is Finn now? Mira asked. In his room. As usual. Mrs. Peterson's expression softened slightly. Poor child hasn't been the same since the accident. Perhaps you'll have better luck than the others. They stopped outside a door decorated with faded superhero stickers. Mrs. Peterson knocked gently. Finn? Your new nanny is here. Silence. Mira stepped forward. May I? She knocked differently, 3 quick taps then 2 slow ones. Finn? My name is Mira. I brought something for you. From her bag she pulled out a small hand-carved wooden knight. Nothing expensive, just something she'd found at a thrift store. I'll leave this outside your door. Knights protect people, right? Maybe this one can protect your room while you decide if you want to meet me. Footsteps shuffled inside. The door cracked open just enough for small fingers to dart out and snatch the knight. Mrs. Peterson looked stunned. That's the most he's responded to anyone in weeks. Mira smiled. Sometimes the smallest gestures speak the loudest. That evening, Mira sat in her modest room, comfortable but clearly separate from the family quarters. She'd unpacked her few belongings, some books, photos of her grandmother, her nursing school textbooks. She'd almost finished her degree before life forced her into nanny work to pay bills. Through her window she could see into what must be Matthias' home office. Even from a distance, his silhouette commanded attention. Broad shoulders hunched over documents, jaw set in concentration. Phone pressed to his ear, gesturing sharply as he spoke. This was a man who controlled everything around him. Mira watched him pace, noting how he paused occasionally to glance toward what she assumed was Finn's wing of the house. Guilt and concern flickered across his features when he thought no one was looking. Mr. Kane? Mrs. Peterson's voice drifted through the intercom. The nanny has arrived safely. Finn responded to her. Mira saw Matthias straighten, something like relief crossing his face. She turned away from the window. Tomorrow would bring their first real interaction, and she had no intention of being another woman swept off her feet by wealth and power. The next morning, Mira woke up early to prepare breakfast for Finn. The kitchen was enormous, all granite counters and stainless steel appliances. She found what she needed and set about making something simple but comforting, pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. You're up early. Mira spun around, spatula in hand. A small boy with dark hair and the biggest, saddest eyes she'd ever seen stood in the doorway. Finn. Good morning, Mira said gently, not moving toward him. I'm Mira. Are you hungry? Finn nodded slightly, then noticed the dinosaur pancakes sizzling in the pan. Those look different, he whispered. His first words to her. They're Stegosaurus pancakes. Much better than regular boring circles, don't you think? The tiniest smile ghosted across Finn's face. Can I help? I was hoping you'd ask. As Finn carefully poured batter into dinosaur shapes, Mira felt something she hadn't in months, purpose. This little boy needed her and she was going to make sure he felt safe again. Finn, she said softly, sitting across from him at the massive dining table, do you want to tell me about your dinosaur knowledge? I bet you know things I don't. He looked up, surprised. Most adults asked about school or feelings or how he was adjusting. Nobody had asked about dinosaurs. Velociraptors hunt in packs, he whispered. They protect each other. Mira's chest tightened. Smart. Family sticks together even when things get scary. Finn's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. My mom and dad, they were supposed to protect me. But they couldn't protect themselves. The raw honesty broke Mira's heart. She reached across the table, not to hug him. He wasn't ready for that, but to simply place her hand near his. Sometimes bad things happen that nobody can stop. But that doesn't mean you're not protected now. Uncle Matthias is never here, Finn said matter-of-factly. He's always working. Mrs. Peterson says I shouldn't bother him. Mira felt a flash of anger. A grieving 6-year-old shouldn't feel like a burden. Well, I'm here. And you're not bothering me. Ever. That afternoon, Mira discovered the real extent of Finn's world. His room was enormous but sterile, expensive toys still in their packaging, educational books lined up like soldiers, everything pristine and untouched. This wasn't a child's room, it was a museum. Do you play with any of these? Mira sked, gesturing to the untouched toys. Finn shrugged. They're too nice. I might break them. Mira's heart shattered. This child was afraid to be a child. Finn, come here. She knelt beside a remote control car that still had its price tag. Want to know a secret? Toys are supposed to get dirty. That's how you know they're loved. She ripped off the packaging and handed him the controller. Let's take this outside and see how fast we can make it go. For the first time since she'd arrived, Finn's eyes sparked with something close to excitement. They spent the next hour racing the car through the gardens, laughing as it crashed into flower beds and got stuck under benches. Finn's formal composure cracked, revealing the playful child underneath. Mira, he called out, giggling as the car spun in circles. It's going crazy. That's what happens when you give it too much freedom, Mira laughed back. Sometimes being a little wild is exactly what we need. As they chased the runaway car, Mira noticed something: cameras. Security cameras everywhere, recording their every move. She wondered if anyone was watching. Inside his city office, Matthias was supposed to be reviewing merger documents. Instead, he found himself staring at the security feed from his home. He'd installed the system after the accident, paranoid about keeping Finn safe. But what he saw on the screen stopped him cold. Finn was running. Actually running, with mud on his knees and joy on his face. And beside him, a young woman with wild curls escaping her ponytail was laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. Matthias had seen dozens of professional caregivers try to help his nephew. They'd used textbook psychology, structured activities, and careful emotional boundaries. None of it had worked. This woman was letting Finn get dirty. She was teaching him to be reckless. And somehow it was working. "Sir?" His assistant's voice cut through his thoughts. "The Sinclair meeting is in 10 minutes. Matthias forced himself to look away from the screen. But throughout the entire meeting with Vanessa's father about their upcoming engagement, all he could think about was the sound of his nephew's laughter. That evening, Matthias returned home to find something unprecedented. Finn waiting by the front door. "Uncle Matthias, Mira taught me how to make the car do wheelies. And we built a fort in my room with the couch cushions." Matthias blinked. Finn hadn't spoken this many words to him since the funeral. "Did you now?" Matthias's voice was careful, not wanting to break the spell. "She said forts are for brave knights who need a safe place to plan their next adventure. Do you want to see?" For a moment, Matthias almost said yes. But his phone buzzed with urgent emails and he caught himself. "Maybe tomorrow, buddy. Uncle Matthias has work to finish." Finn's face fell slightly, but he nodded with the resigned understanding of a child who'd learned not to expect too much. As Matthias headed to his office, he passed the kitchen and heard humming. Through the doorway, he saw Mira washing dishes, moving with an easy grace that made the cold mansion feel warmer somehow. She looked up and caught him watching. "Everything all right, Mr. Kane?" "He spoke to me," Matthias said, surprised by his own words. "Finn. He actually told me about his day." Mira smiled, and Matthias felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. "He's been carrying a lot of pain. Sometimes it just takes the right moment to let it out." "How did you know? The car, the fort? How did you know what he needed?" Mira dried her hands on a dish towel, studying Matthias's face. "Because I remember being 6 and scared. Sometimes adults forget that children don't need perfect solutions. They just need someone to notice they're drowning." Matthias felt something shift inside him. Shame, maybe, or recognition. When was the last time he'd really looked at Finn? Really listened? The other nanny said he was withdrawn, difficult. "He's not difficult," Mira said firmly. "He's grieving. And he's brilliant. Did you know he can name every dinosaur species and explain their hunting patterns? He just needed someone to care about dinosaurs instead of trying to fix him." Matthias found himself leaning against the doorframe, drawn into conversation despite himself. "I don't know anything about dinosaurs." "Then maybe it's time you learned." Mira's eyes held a challenge that reminded him of something, the way she'd looked at him when she caught him staring earlier. Before Matthias could respond, his phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. "I should take this," he said reluctantly. Mira nodded and returned to her dishes. "Darling," Vanessa's voice was crisp through the speaker. "The caterers need our final head count for the engagement party. And my mother wants to discuss the seating arrangements." As Vanessa rattled off social obligations, Matthias found himself watching Mira through the kitchen doorway. She moved with such natural ease, humming softly as she worked. There was something magnetic about her complete lack of pretense. "Matthias? Are you listening?" "Sorry, what?" "The engagement party, darling. It's in 3 weeks. The Sinclairs are flying in from London specifically for this. Everything must be perfect." Perfect? Matthias's entire life was about perfection. Perfect mergers, perfect image, perfect marriage to the perfect socialite. So why did he find himself more interested in a woman who let children get muddy and spoke to him like he was just another person? After ending the call, Matthias walked past the kitchen again. Mira was gone, but she'd left a note on the counter in her flowing handwriting. "Mr. Kane, Finn asked if you might join us for story time tomorrow night. 7 p.m. in his room. No pressure, but he misses having a grown-up who listens to his adventures. Mira." Matthias stared at the note, her words echoing in his mind. When was the last time anyone had invited him anywhere without wanting something in return? He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Upstairs, Mira tucked Finn into bed, reading him a story about brave knights and magical kingdoms. As she reached the part about the knight learning to be vulnerable, Finn interrupted. Mira? Do you think Uncle Matthias is lonely? The question caught her off guard. Why do you ask, sweetheart? He always looks sad when he thinks nobody's watching. Like maybe he needs a friend too. Myra's heart squeezed. This perceptive little boy saw right through his uncle's powerful facade. Maybe he does, she said softly. But sometimes grown-ups forget how to ask for friendship. Maybe we could teach him? Finn's eyes were hopeful. Mira kissed his forehead. Maybe we could. As she turned off his light, Mira had no idea that Matthias was standing in the hallway, having climbed the stairs to check on his nephew for the first time in weeks. He'd heard every word of their conversation. That night, Matthias Kane couldn't sleep. He stood in his executive suite bathroom at 2 a.m., staring at his reflection in the mirror. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of months without proper rest. The accident had taken more than his brother and sister-in-law, it had shattered his carefully ordered world. For 15 years, Matthias had built his empire with ruthless precision. Kane Industries controlled shipping routes across 3 continents. His merger and acquisition deals were legendary. Competitors feared him. Investors worshipped him. But none of that mattered when he'd gotten the call. Mr. K. There's been an accident. Matthias splashed cold water on his face, trying to banish the memory. His brother Michael had been driving home from their anniversary dinner. The truck that ran the red light killed them both instantly, leaving 6-year-old Finn an orphan. And leaving Matthias, a man who understood profit margins better than emotions, suddenly responsible for a grieving child. The irony wasn't lost on him. Matthias could negotiate billion-dollar deals in his sleep, but he couldn't get his nephew to eat breakfast without crying. Until Mira arrived. Matthias's phone buzzed with another urgent email. He ignored it, instead pulling up the security feed on his tablet. There was Finn's room, dimly lit by his nightlight. The boy was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. And there, in the chair beside his bed, was Mira. She'd fallen asleep reading to him, a book of fairy tales open in her lap. Matthias zoomed in slightly. Even in sleep, her face held a gentleness that seemed to radiate warmth. Her dark hair had escaped its practical ponytail, framing her face in soft waves. She looked nothing like the polished women in his social circle. No designer clothes, no professional makeup, no calculated poses. She looked real. Sir? His assistant's voice came through the intercom. Miss Sinclair is here for your breakfast meeting. Matthias closed the tablet quickly, guilt flooding through him. He'd been watching Mira sleep like some kind of stalker. Send her up. Vanessa Sinclair swept into his penthouse office minutes later, looking impeccable even at 7 a.m. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled and her smile was camera-ready. Darling, you look exhausted. She kissed his cheek with practiced affection. This whole guardian situation is wearing on you. Perhaps it's time to consider boarding school for the boy? Matthias stiffened. His name is Finn. And he's not going anywhere. Of course not permanently, Vanessa said smoothly, settling into the chair across from his desk. But he needs structure, professional care. This nanny situation is clearly temporary. The nanny is working. Matthias's voice was sharper than intended. Vanessa's perfectly arched eyebrow rose. Is she? I heard from Margaret at the agency that she was let go from her previous position under questionable circumstances. Questionable how? Theft allegations. Apparently she grew too familiar with her previous employer. Vanessa's tone was casual, but her eyes were calculating. I'm not saying she's guilty, but you know how these working-class girls can be around wealthy men. They see opportunity. That's enough, Vanessa. I'm looking out for our family's interests. When we're married, Finn will be my responsibility too. I just think we should be cautious about who we allow close to him. Our family. Our interests. Matthias noticed how Vanessa spoke about their future like it was already decided, already owned. I can handle my own household, he said coldly. Vanessa's smile tightened. Of course, darling. I'm just concerned. The engagement party is in 2 weeks. All the society pages will be watching. We can't afford any complications. After she left, Matthias tried to focus on work. But his mind kept drifting to Mira's note, still folded in his jacket pocket. He misses having a grown-up who listens to his adventures. That evening, Matthias found himself standing outside Finn's room at exactly 7 p.m. Through the crack in the door, he could hear Mira's voice weaving a tale about a young prince who had to be brave when his kingdom faced darkness. But the prince was scared. Finn's voice was soft but engaged. How could he be brave if he was scared? That's the secret, Mira replied. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when your heart is pounding. Matthias's hand froze on the door handle. When had he last done something because it was right rather than profitable? He knocked gently. "Come in, Uncle Matthias." Finn called out, his voice bright with excitement. Matthias entered to find them sitting on the floor, surrounded by books and drawings. Mira looked up, surprised but pleased. "You came," she said simply. "I said maybe tomorrow. This is tomorrow." Matthias sat down awkwardly on the carpet, his expensive suit completely out of place among the children's books. "Tell Uncle Matthias about the brave prince," Finn urged Mira. As Mira continued the story, Matthias found himself genuinely listening, not analyzing, not planning his next move, just listening. Her voice was soothing but animated, bringing the characters to life with different voices and gestures. "And then what happened?" Matthias found himself asking, caught up despite himself. Mira's eyes met his surprise and warmth flickering in their depths. "Well, the prince realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is admit you need help." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning neither of them was ready to acknowledge. After Finn fell asleep, Matthias walked Mira to the door of his nephew's room. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I haven't seen him this happy since." "Since before the accident," Mira finished gently. "He's not broken, Mr. King. He's just learning how to put the pieces back together." Matthias studied her face in the dim hallway light. "And you? Are you putting pieces back together too?" The question surprised them both. Mira's breath caught slightly. "We all are, I think," she said softly. "Some of us just hide it better than others." Their eyes held for a moment too long, awareness crackling between them like electricity. Mira was the first to look away. "Good night, Mr. Kane." "Matthias," he said impulsively. When it's just family time, call me Matthias." Mira's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Good night, Matthias." As she walked away, Matthias remained in the hallway, watching the gentle sway of her movements. For the first time in years, he felt something he couldn't quantify in spreadsheets or measure in profit margins. He felt alive. The next morning, Matthias canceled his early meetings. Instead of rushing to the office, he decided to spend time at home, maybe join Finn for breakfast. It was Tuesday, exactly 1 week since Mira had arrived. As he walked through the quiet mansion toward the family wing, Matthias thought about last night's story time. The way Mira had looked at him when he admitted he wanted to hear the ending. The way her voice had softened when she called him by his first name. Tuesday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Mira woke before dawn, her internal clock already adjusted to Finn's schedule. She'd been at the Kane mansion for exactly 1 week, and already she felt more at home here than she had anywhere in years. Not because of the luxury, she could care less about marble countertops and crystal chandeliers, but because of Finn. The little boy was healing slowly but surely. Yesterday he'd actually laughed until his stomach hurt when she taught him to make shadow puppets on the wall. Last night, he'd fallen asleep holding her hand instead of crying himself to exhaustion. Mira padded quietly to her room to change into her daily uniform, a simple navy dress that Mrs. Peterson had deemed appropriate for staff. She'd grown to hate that dress. It made her feel invisible, reduced to nothing more than hired help. But this morning felt different. Maybe it was the way Matthias had looked at her during story time, really looked at her like she was a person worth knowing. Maybe it was how he'd asked her to call him by his first name, his voice soft and almost vulnerable. Mira shook her head. Dangerous thoughts. Matthias Kane lived in a world she'd never belonged to, engaged to a woman who probably spent more on shoes than Mira made in a year. She pulled off her comfortable sleep shirt and reached for the hated uniform, humming softly to herself. Through her window, she could see the gardens where she and Finn had raced the remote control car. Today maybe they'd explore the greenhouse. He'd mentioned wanting to learn about plants. The morning light streaming through her window felt warm, hopeful. For the first time in months, Mira felt like maybe her life was heading somewhere good. That's when the door opened. Mira spun around, her heart stopping mid-beat. There, frozen in the doorway like a statue, stood Matthias Kane. His dark hair was still damp from his morning shower. He wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up revealing strong forearms. His tie hung loose around his neck. And his eyes, those intense gray eyes that commanded boardrooms and bent corporations to his will, were locked on her. She was standing there in nothing but her delicate white camisole and simple cotton underwear, her uniform clutched in one hand. For a heartbeat that felt like eternity, neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. Mira could see the shock on Matthias's face, the way his pupils dilated as his gaze swept over her. She could see him trying to look away and failing. Could see the exact moment his composure, that legendary self-control, completely shattered. Most women in her position would have screamed, would have grabbed a rope, would have stammered apologies while covering themselves in embarrassment. Mira Reyes was not most women. Fire blazed in her dark eyes. She snatched the nearest pillow from her bed, held it against herself and let her fury loose. Ever heard of knocking? Or do billionaires buy the right to invade people's privacy too? Matthias's mouth opened, then closed. In 34 years of life, 20 years of business, countless boardroom battles and hostile takeovers, no one had ever spoken to him like that. Especially not a half-dressed woman who should have been intimidated by his presence. I thought this was the linen closet. He managed, his voice rougher than usual. Does this look like a closet to you? Mira's voice dripped with sarcasm. Or did you just assume the help doesn't deserve the basic human decency of a closed door meaning privacy? Matthias felt heat rise in his chest. Not anger but something far more dangerous. Her defiance was intoxicating. The way she stood there, chin raised, completely unafraid of him despite being caught in the most vulnerable position possible. You're right. I should have knocked. I should have. You should have stayed in your own wing of this palace. Mira cut him off, her cheeks flushed with indignation and something else, something that made her look absolutely radiant. But let me guess, you're used to people jumping out of your way, aren't you? Well, here's a news flash, I don't jump. The pillow she held against herself had slipped slightly, revealing the gentle curve of her shoulder, the elegant line of her collarbone. Matthias forced himself to focus on her eyes, but the damage was done. Every rational thought in his head had been replaced by one overwhelming realization. Mira Reyes was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. I can see that, he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made Mira's pulse quicken. You definitely don't jump. Something in his tone made Mira pause. The angry fire in her eyes flickered, replaced by confusion. He wasn't leering. He wasn't making excuses. He was looking at her like she was a puzzle he desperately wanted to solve. I'll let you get dressed, Matthias said, taking a step back. But his eyes never left her face. Mira? What? Her voice was breathier than she intended. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. You deserve better than someone barging into your private space. The apology was simple, genuine. It caught Mira completely off guard. Matthias turned to leave, then paused at the doorway without looking back. And Mira? Thank you. For the invitation to story time. For making Finn laugh. For treating him like he matters. He does matter, Mira whispered. I know. I'm just glad he has someone who remembers that. The door closed softly behind him, leaving Mira standing there, heart racing, mind reeling. She sank onto her bed, the pillow falling from nerveless fingers. What had just happened? The most powerful man she'd ever met had seen her half naked, and instead of taking advantage or making it weird, he'd apologized. Had thanked her. Had looked at her like she was precious. Mira pressed her hands to her burning cheeks. This was bad. This was dangerous. She was supposed to be invisible, professional, just another employee. But the way Matthias's voice had gone soft when he said her name, the way his eyes had darkened when she challenged him, the way he'd looked genuinely grateful instead of entitled, she was in trouble. Down the hall, Matthias leaned against his closed office door, his heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. He'd seen beautiful women before, dated models, socialites, heiresses. But none of them had ever made him feel like this. Completely out of control. Mira's skin had been golden in the morning light. Her curves were natural, feminine, real. But it wasn't just her body that had affected him, it was her spirit. The way she'd stood there, unashamed and unafraid, verbally sparring with him while wearing nothing but silk and defiance. Most people cowered when he entered a room. Mira had attacked. Matthias ran a hand through his hair, trying to regain his composure. This was insane. He was engaged to Vanessa. Their wedding would cement the biggest business merger in Kane Industries history. His entire future was mapped out, contracted, planned to perfection. So why couldn't he stop thinking about the way Myra's eyes had flashed when she told him she didn't jump? His phone rang. Vanessa again. How's my future husband this morning? Her voice purred through the speaker. Matthias closed his eyes. Fine. Just getting ready for the office. Wonderful. I've scheduled our engagement photo shoot for this afternoon. Vogue wants us on the cover, Power Couple of the Year. Isn't that exciting? Sure. Matthias's voice sounded hollow even to himself. Darling, you sound distracted. Is everything all right at home? The nanny isn't causing problems, is she? Matthias thought about Mira's blazing eyes, her fearless voice, the way she'd made his nephew feel safe for the first time since the tragedy. No problems, he lied. But as he hung up the phone, Matthias knew he was lying to himself too. Mira Reyes was definitely a problem. She was the kind of problem that could destroy everything he built. And for the first time in his life, Matthias wasn't sure he cared. Later that morning, he found himself taking an unusual route through the mansion on his way to leave for work. He told himself he was checking on Finn, making sure the boy was eating properly. He definitely wasn't hoping to catch another glimpse of the woman who just turned his world upside down. But when he heard Mira's laughter drifting from the kitchen, warm and uninhibited and absolutely magnetic, Matthias had to stop. Had to listen. No, Finn, you add the chocolate chips after you mix the batter. Otherwise they'll melt and disappear. But what if I want them to disappear? What if I want chocolate pancakes instead of pancakes with chocolate? Mira's delighted laugh made Matthias's chest tighten. Then you, my brilliant little chef, are thinking like an innovator. Let's try both ways and see which one tastes better. Matthias smiled despite himself. Mira was teaching Finn that rules could be bent, that creativity mattered more than perfection. Everything Matthias had forgotten how to do. His phone buzzed with urgent emails. His driver was waiting. The China deal needed his immediate attention. But for the first time in his career, Matthias Kane didn't want to leave home. And that terrified him more than any hostile takeover ever could. That afternoon, Vanessa arrived at the Kane mansion unannounced. She had her own key, of course, another symbol of her rightful place in Matthias's life. She found them in the solarium. Mira was kneeling on the marble floor, helping Finn plant seeds in small pots. Her uniform was dirty, her hair escaping its ponytail, and she was laughing at something the boy had said. Dirt smudged her cheek and she looked radiant. Finn saw Vanessa first. His smile vanished. "Hello, Finn," Vanessa said with practiced sweetness. "What are you two up to?" "We're growing a garden," Finn mumbled, suddenly shy. "How rustic." Vanessa's gaze swept over the mess of soil and seedlings. "Mira, isn't it? I'm Vanessa Sinclair, Matthias's fiancée." Mira stood, wiping her hands on a towel. "Nice to meet you, Miss Sinclair." "It's actually soon to be Mrs. Kane," Vanessa corrected with a smile that never reached her eyes. "I hope you're settling in well. Though I have to say this gardening project seems rather messy indoors." "Children learn through exploration," Mira replied evenly. "Sometimes that means getting a little dirty. Of course. Though I imagine when Matthias and I are married, we'll want to maintain certain standards. Finn will need to understand proper behavior for his position in society." Mira felt her chest tighten. The subtle threat was unmistakable. "Finn is 6, Mira said carefully. He's still learning how to be a child again after losing his parents. Exactly why he needs structure, not indulgence." Vanessa's voice was silk wrapped around steel. "Matthias and I believe children thrive with clear boundaries." Finn looked between them, sensing the tension but not understanding it. Mira knelt beside him again. "Why don't you go wash your hands for lunch, sweetheart? I'll clean up here." After Finn left, Vanessa dropped her mask completely. "Let's be frank, Mira. You seem like a nice girl, but let's not pretend this arrangement is permanent. Once Matthias and I are married, we'll be making different childcare arrangements." "I see." Mira's voice was steady, but inside, her heart was racing. "I'm sure you do. A woman with your background understands how these things work. Temporary positions, temporary benefits. I trust you won't allow yourself to develop any inappropriate attachments." The words hit Mira like slaps. Inappropriate attachments. As if caring about Finn was somehow wrong. As if her feelings were inconvenient complications to be managed. "My only attachment is to that little boy's well-being," Mira said firmly. "Good. Then we understand each other." Vanessa moved closer, her perfume cloying and expensive. "Because if I were to discover that someone was taking advantage of Matthias's generous nature during this difficult time, well, let's just say the Sinclair family has considerable influence. Enough to ensure certain people never work in respectable households again." Mira's hands clenched at her sides. "Are you threatening me?" Vanessa's smile was poisonously sweet. "Matthias is going through a challenging phase with this guardianship situation. He's vulnerable, grateful to anyone who helps with Finn. Some women might mistake that gratitude for something more meaningful. And you think I'm one of those women? I think you're smart enough to know the difference between a job and a fantasy." The door opened behind them. Matthias stepped into the solarium, his presence immediately commanding the space. Vanessa. I didn't know you were coming by. Surprise visit, darling. I was just getting acquainted with Mira. Vanessa's voice transformed instantly back to sugary sweetness. She's doing wonderful work with Finn. Matthias's eyes moved between them, sensing undercurrents he couldn't quite read. Where is Finn? Washing up for lunch, Mira said, her voice carefully neutral. But Matthias caught something in her expression. Hurt, maybe, or anger barely contained. Vanessa, could you give us a moment? I need to discuss Finn's schedule with Mira. Vanessa's eyes flashed with annoyance, but she covered it quickly. Of course. I'll wait in your office, darling. After she left, Matthias turned to Mira. Is everything all right? You seem. I'm fine. Mira began gathering the gardening supplies with sharp, efficient movements. Just my position here, as you put it. I didn't put it in any way. What did Vanessa say to you? Mira looked up, meeting his concerned gaze. For a moment she almost told him everything. Almost let him see how Vanessa's words had cut her. But what was the point? Vanessa was right about one thing. Mira was temporary. A hired employee in a world where she'd never truly belong. Nothing I didn't already know, Mira said softly. I should go check on Finn. As she walked past Matthias, her shoulder brushed against his arm. The brief contact sent electricity shooting through them both. Myra's step faltered slightly and Matthias's breath caught. Neither acknowledged what had just happened. But both felt it. Matthias watched her leave, his jaw clenching as understanding dawned. Vanessa had said something to upset Mira, something that had dimmed the bright spirit he'd glimpsed that morning in the doorway. That evening Matthias found Vanessa in his study, flipping through wedding magazines. I've been thinking about our engagement party, she said without looking up. Perhaps it's time we made some household changes. The nanny situation seems unstable. Mira is excellent with Finn. I'm sure she is. But darling, when we're married, we'll want our own staff. People who understand our lifestyle, our expectations. Vanessa finally looked up, her blue eyes calculating. Someone more suitable. Matthias set down his whiskey glass with deliberate control. Suitable how? Someone who knows her place. Who won't confuse professional boundaries with personal ones. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Matthias studied his fiancée's beautiful, cold face and realized he was seeing her clearly for the first time. And you think Mira doesn't know her place? I think Mira is young, pretty, and working closely with a very wealthy, very eligible man who's going through an emotional time. These situations can become complicated. Matthias's voice was dangerously quiet. Are you suggesting Mira would take advantage of the situation? I'm suggesting that some women see opportunity where others see employment. Vanessa closed the magazine and moved to pour herself wine. Don't worry, darling. I had a lovely chat with her today. I'm sure she understands now. Understanding crashed over Matthias like a cold wave. Vanessa had threatened Mira. Had made her feel small, unwanted, disposable. The woman who'd faced him down half naked without flinching, who'd brought joy back to his nephew's life, who'd looked at him like he was just a man instead of a bank account, Vanessa had tried to break her. What exactly did you say to her? Nothing cruel, I assure you. Vanessa sipped her wine delicately. She seemed to take it well. Matthias thought about Myra's forced smile, her sudden distance, the way she'd avoided his eyes during dinner. And for the first time since their engagement began, he wondered what kind of woman he was planning to marry. The next few days became a delicate dance of avoidance and magnetic attraction. Mira threw herself into caring for Finn with renewed intensity, as if loving the child harder could somehow shield her from the growing awareness that she was falling for his uncle. She took Finn on long walks through the gardens, taught him to bake cookies from scratch, and read him adventure stories until he fell asleep with a smile on his face. But Matthias was everywhere. He'd started coming home earlier, lingering in doorways, watching her work with Finn. Mira could feel his presence like electricity in the air, the way his gaze followed her movements, the way conversations paused when she entered a room. Thursday evening, as she helped Finn with a jigsaw puzzle in the library, Matthias appeared with his laptop. Mind if I work in here? My office feels too isolated tonight. Myra's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. It's your house. Matthias settled into a leather chair across the room, but instead of focusing on his screen, she caught him watching them. When Finn got frustrated with a particularly difficult piece, Mira gently guided his hands. Sometimes the piece that looks wrong is exactly right. You just have to trust it belongs. Matthias's typing stopped. Mira could feel his attention like a physical touch. I found it. Finn squealed, fitting the piece perfectly. Mira, you're magic. No magic, sweetheart. Just patience. Uncle Matthias, come see. We're almost done. Matthias closed his laptop and joined them on the floor. As he knelt beside Mira, their shoulders brushed. The contact sent heat racing through both of them. This piece, Matthias said, picking up a corner fragment. Where does it belong? Wherever it fits, Mira said softly, their faces closer than they should be. Sometimes you have to try different places before you find where you belong. Their eyes met over Finn's bent head. The question hung unspoken between them. Where did they belong? Found it. Finn said to Mira, oblivious to the charged moment. Uncle Matthias, you're good at puzzles too. Matthias smiled, the expression transforming his usually stern features. Seems like I'm learning. Friday brought rain, trapping them all indoors. Mira was teaching Finn piano in the music room when she heard footsteps. Matthias appeared, still wearing his business suit but with his tie loosened. Don't stop, he said when Mira's hands stilled on the keys. I heard music. I haven't heard music in this house since. Since the accident, Mira understood. Finn's been asking about the piano. I thought we could start with simple songs. Can you play Uncle Matthias's song? Finn asked suddenly. Matthias frowned. I don't have a song. Yes, you do. Mama used to play it when you were sad. She said it was your favorite when you were little. Matthias's face went pale. Mira saw the grief flash across his features before he could hide it. I don't remember, he said quietly. I do. Finn's small fingers found the keys, picking out a simple, haunting melody. It goes like this. The music filled the room, achingly beautiful and heartbreakingly sad. Matthias closed his eyes, his composure cracking. Mira's hands joined Finn's on the keys, adding harmony to the melody. Together they brought the song to life. When the last note faded, Matthias opened his eyes. They were bright with unshed tears. She used to say music was the language of the heart, he whispered. She was right, Mira said gently. Hearts speak when words aren't enough. Matthias looked at her then. Really looked at her, not as an employee, not as a temporary fixture, but as a woman who was healing his family with her presence. Mira, The moment was shattered as Matthias's phone rang. Vanessa's name flashed on the screen. I should take this. Mira nodded, her chest tight with disappointment. Come on, Finn. Let's see if we can remember any other songs. As their voices drifted from the music room, Matthias answered the call with growing reluctance. Darling, I have wonderful news. Vanessa's voice was bright with excitement. Daddy's booked the Plaza Ballroom for our engagement party. 500 guests, including the mayor and 3 ambassadors. It's going to be the social event of the season. Matthias listened with half his attention, the other half still focused on the gentle piano melody drifting from the music room. Are you listening? This is important, Matthias. The merger documents will be signed at the party. Everything we've worked for comes together that night. Everything they'd worked for. When had their relationship become a business strategy? I'll be there, Matthias said automatically. Of course you will. It's our future, darling. Our destiny. After hanging up, Matthias stood in his hallway torn between two worlds. Down the corridor he could hear Mira's laughter mixing with Finn's, warm, genuine, free. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with more messages from Vanessa about seating charts and photographer schedules. That night, Matthias made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of working late in his office, he found himself walking toward the kitchen at 9 p.m., drawn by the sound of quiet conversation. Mira was teaching Finn how to make hot chocolate the old-fashioned way, melting real chocolate and adding cinnamon. The secret, she was saying, is patience. Good things can't be rushed. Even when you really, really want them? Finn asked. Especially then. Matthias cleared his throat softly. Both Mira and Finn looked up, surprised. Room for one more? Matthias asked, feeling oddly nervous. Uncle Matthias. Finn beamed. Mira is teaching me to make grown-up hot chocolate. Grown-up hot chocolate? Matthias raised an eyebrow looking at Mira. No instant powder, Mira explained, her cheeks slightly pink. Real chocolate, real milk, real patience. Real ingredients for real people, Matthias said quietly, his eyes holding hers. Mira's breath caught. The way he'd said real people, like he was tired of artificial everything. Would you like some? She asked softly. Matthias nodded, unable to trust his voice. As Mira moved around the kitchen, he noticed everything. The graceful way she stirred the mixture, how she hummed under her breath, the way she automatically made sure Finn didn't touch the hot stove. She cared for his nephew like he was her own child. She moved through his house like she belonged there. and when she handed him the mug, their fingers brushed. The contact lasted a second too long, sending warmth racing up both their arms. "It's perfect," Matthias said after his first sip. But he wasn't looking at the hot chocolate. He was looking at Mira. "Uncle Matthias?" Finn's voice was sleepy now. "Will you read me a story tonight?" "I should probably. Please?" Mira's voice was soft. "He's been asking for you all week." Matthias found himself nodding. As they walked upstairs together, Finn between them, it felt like something Matthias had never experienced before. It felt like family. In Finn's room, Matthias sat awkwardly on the edge of the bed while Mira curled up in the reading chair. Together they took turns reading about brave knights and magical kingdoms. When Finn finally fell asleep, Matthias and Mira found themselves alone in the dimly lit room. "He adores you," Mira whispered. "He needs stability. Consistency. Things I don't know how to give him. You gave him tonight. That's enough to start with." Matthias looked at her, really looked. Her hair was soft in the lamplight, her face gentle with affection for his nephew. She belonged here in a way that had nothing to do with employment contracts. "Mira?" She stood quickly, breaking the spell. "I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow's another busy day." But as she moved past him toward the door, Matthias caught her wrist gently. "Thank you. For everything you're doing for him. For us." Mira's pulse hammered under his fingers. "It's just my job." "No," Matthias said quietly, his thumb brushing over her wrist bone. "It's not." They stood there in the darkness, connected by his gentle touch, both knowing they were crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Mira pulled away carefully. "Good night, Matthias." But as she reached the door, she turned back. "Matthias? Your brother and sister-in-law, they'd be proud of the man you're becoming for Finn." Long after she'd gone, Matthias sat in his nephew's room, staring at the empty chair where Mira had been. For the first time in his life he was falling in love. And it terrified him more than any business deal ever could. Saturday morning brought deceptive peace to the Kane mansion. Mira was in the greenhouse with Finn, transplanting the seedlings they'd started earlier in the week. The little boy chattered happily about which plants would grow fastest, his grief temporarily forgotten in the simple joy of nurturing new life. "Mira, look. This one's already getting bigger." Finn pointed to a tiny green shoot pushing through the soil. "That's because you've been taking such good care of it. Plants grow when they feel loved." "Like people?" Finn asked with the profound innocence only children possess. Mira's throat tightened. "Exactly like people." They worked in comfortable silence, the morning sun streaming through the glass walls. Mira had almost forgotten about the tension simmering beneath the mansion's elegant surface. Until Vanessa arrived. "There you are." Vanessa's voice rang out as she stepped into the greenhouse, her designer heels clicking against the stone floor. She looked immaculate as always, cream silk blouse, pearl necklace, not a hair out of place. "Miss Sinclair," Mira said, standing and brushing soil from her hands. "We weren't expecting you. I came to see Matthias, but Mrs. Peterson said he's in emergency meetings all morning. Something about the Tokyo deal." Vanessa's smile was bright and sharp. "Finn, darling, why don't you run inside and ask the cook to prepare us some tea? The grown-ups need to chat." Finn looked between them uncertainly. "Can't Mira come too?" "Of course she can, sweetheart. After we have our little talk." Mira's stomach clenched, but she kept her expression neutral. "Go ahead, Finn. I'll be right behind you." Once they were alone, Vanessa's mask dropped completely. "I thought we had an understanding," Vanessa said, her voice ice cold. "About what?" "About boundaries. About knowing your place." Vanessa stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the humid greenhouse air. "But it seems you've been getting quite comfortable here." Mira lifted her chin. "I'm doing my job." "Are you?" "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're playing house with my fiancé and his nephew. I care about Finn's well-being. That's what I was hired to do." "Really?" Vanessa pulled out her phone, swiping through photos. "Because these security footage screenshots tell a different story." Myra's blood went cold. On Vanessa's screen were images from throughout the week. Matthias kneeling beside her during puzzle time, their shoulders touching during the piano lesson, the moment in the kitchen when their hands had lingered over the hot chocolate mugs. "Cozy, aren't they?" Vanessa's voice dripped with malice. "A woman in your position getting so intimate with her employer. One might draw certain conclusions. Those are innocent moments." "Are they?" "Because to me, they look like a gold-digging nanny seducing a vulnerable man during his family crisis." Vanessa's eyes glittered with cruel satisfaction. "Do you know what Matthias is worth, Mira?" $17 billion. That's quite an incentive for a woman with medical bills and an eviction notice. Myra's face went white. How do you know about? I know everything about you. Your grandmother's cancer treatments. Your student loans. Your previous employer's theft accusations. Your desperate financial situation that led you here. Vanessa circled Mira like a predator. I know you needed this job badly enough to overlook certain moral boundaries. I have never. Haven't you? Late-night conversations, private moments, making yourself indispensable to both Matthias and Finn? Classic manipulation tactics. Vanessa's voice was surgical in its precision. But here's what you don't know. Matthias and I have been planning our future since we were children. Our family's business relationship goes back generations. This engagement isn't just personal, it's dynastic. Mira felt nauseated. Every moment she'd shared with Matthias, every spark of connection, Vanessa was twisting it into something ugly and calculated. I'm not trying to break up your engagement. No, you're trying to replace me. And for a brief, pathetic moment you actually thought it might work. Vanessa laughed, the sound like breaking glass. Did you really believe a man like Matthias Kane would choose a nobody nanny over everything he's built? Over his family's legacy? Tears stung Myra's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You're right. I am a nobody. But I love that little boy and I'm good for him. Love. Vanessa spat the word like it was poison. How touching. But love doesn't pay for cancer treatments, does it? Love doesn't keep you from getting evicted. Mira flinched as if she'd been slapped. Here's what's going to happen, Vanessa continued, moving in for the kill. You're going to maintain professional distance. No more cozy family moments. No more lingering conversations with Matthias. You'll do your job, nothing more, nothing less, until we find a suitable replacement after the wedding. And if I don't? Vanessa's smile was pure venom. Then I'll make sure every wealthy family in this city knows about your theft allegations. I'll ensure you never work in childcare again. And I'll make certain your grandmother's medical team receives some very concerning information about her granddaughter's stability and trustworthiness. Myra's hands trembled with rage. You can't threaten my grandmother. I can do whatever is necessary to protect my family. And make no mistake, Matthias and Finn are my family. You're just temporary help who got confused about her role. Mira stood frozen, humiliation and fury warring in her chest. She wanted to scream, to fight back, to tell this vicious woman exactly what she thought of her threats. But her grandmother's face flashed in her mind. Weak from chemotherapy, trusting Mira to handle everything. I understand, Mira whispered, the words tasting like ash. Excellent. I knew you were smarter than you looked. Vanessa checked her reflection in her phone screen, smoothing an imaginary imperfection. Oh, and Mira? Matthias doesn't need to know about our little chat. Men get so unnecessarily emotional about these things. Vanessa click-clacked out of the greenhouse, leaving Mira standing among the plants she and Finn had so carefully tended. The seedlings that had seemed so full of promise suddenly looked fragile, vulnerable. Just like her. Mira sank onto the potting bench, finally allowing the tears to fall. She'd been stupid to think this could be anything more than a job. Stupid to believe that a man like Matthias could see past the class divide. Stupid to fall in love with a life that was never meant for her. But it wasn't just her heart breaking, it was the thought of disappointing Finn. Of leaving him when he'd finally started to heal. Mira? She spun around, hastily wiping her eyes. Matthias stood in the greenhouse doorway, his expression concerned. Are you all right? Vanessa said you two had a nice chat, but you look... I'm fine. Mira forced brightness into her voice. Just tired. The humidity here is overwhelming. Matthias stepped closer, his eyes sharp with intelligence. What did she say to you? Nothing important. Just... Mira defying expectations. Mira. Matthias's voice was gentle but firm. Look at me. Against her better judgment she did. His gray eyes were warm with concern, and she almost broke down right there. She reminded me that I work for you, Mira said carefully. That's all. Matthias studied her face, reading the carefully controlled pain in her expression. And she's right. I should maintain professional boundaries. For everyone's sake. The words came out steady, but Matthias heard the tremor underneath. He also saw what Mira was trying to hide. The devastation, the humiliation, the forced resignation. Professional boundaries, he repeated slowly. Yes, it's better this way. Cleaner. Matthias felt rage building in his chest. Not at Mira. At Vanessa, at himself, at a system that made a woman like Mira feel she had to apologize for existing in his space. Mira, I should check on Finn. She moved toward the door, but Matthias stepped into her path. What did she threaten you with? Myra's eyes widened. I don't know what you mean. Vanessa doesn't make suggestions. She makes demands backed by consequences. So what did she threaten? Mira's composure finally cracked. It doesn't matter. She's right about everything. I don't belong here. I don't belong in your world. My world. Matthias's voice was rough with emotion. Mira, this isn't my world. This is my prison. And you're the first person in years who's made me want to break free. The confession hung between them, raw and dangerous. Mira shook her head, backing away. Don't. Please don't say things like that. What? Because they're true? Because they're impossible. Mira's voice broke. You have obligations, expectations, a future mapped out. And I'm just the nanny who got too attached. Matthias closed the distance between them in 2 strides. You are not just anything. You're the woman who brought my nephew back to life. Who made me remember what laughter sounds like in this house. Who looks at me like I'm a man instead of a bank account. Myra's heart hammered against her ribs. Matthias, we can't. Can't what? Feel something real for once. Their faces were inches apart now. Mira could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Your fiancé is right, Mira whispered. I don't have anything to offer you except complications. Then maybe, Matthias said softly, his breath warm against her cheek, complications are exactly what I need. For one perfect, terrifying moment, the world balanced on the edge of a kiss. Then Mira stepped back, breaking the spell. I can't be the reason you destroy your life. And she walked away, leaving Matthias standing alone among the plants they'd grown together, finally understanding what Vanessa had done. His fiancée had just demurred at war on the only woman who'd ever made him feel truly alive. The spring showcase at Finn's private academy was meant to be a celebration of childhood achievements. Parents filled the elegantly appointed auditorium, their designer clothes and polished smiles creating a tapestry of privilege that Mira had learned to navigate carefully over the past months. She sat in the back row as always, her simple dress a stark contrast to the sea of couture around her. This was Finn's moment, and she wouldn't let her presence in the family section cause whispers that might overshadow his performance. Finn took the stage for his poetry recitation, and Mira's heart swelled with pride. The same boy who wouldn't speak when she first arrived now stood confidently before 200 people, his voice clear and strong as he recited verses about finding light in darkness. Every word was a testament to how far he'd come, how love and patience had slowly healed his wounded spirit. Matthias sat in the front row with Vanessa, his jaw tight with the effort of maintaining appearances. He tried to convince Mira to sit with them, but she'd refused, knowing the gossip it would generate. Even now, she could feel eyes upon her, mothers leaning together to whisper behind manicured hands. As Finn finished to thunderous applause, Mira started to slip toward the exit. She'd congratulate him privately later, away from prying eyes. But Vanessa's voice cut through the noise like a blade. How wonderful that even the help feels welcome at our family events. The words were spoken just loudly enough for the surrounding families to hear, delivered with Vanessa's trademark smile that never reached her eyes. Mira froze, her cheeks burning as conversations died around them. Though I suppose, Vanessa continued, her voice honey-sweet with poison, some people don't understand appropriate boundaries. It's so important for staff to remember their place, don't you think? The silence was deafening. Mira felt every eye in the auditorium turned toward her, some with pity, others with curiosity, many with judgment. She could handle Vanessa's cruelty in private, had endured months of subtle cuts and calculated humiliations. But this public degradation in front of Finn's classmates and their families was designed to destroy not just her dignity but any sense of belonging she'd found. She lifted her chin, preparing to leave with whatever grace she could muster, when Matthias's voice rang out clear and furious. Enough. He rose from his seat, his presence commanding immediate attention. The whispers died completely as Matthias Kane, the man whose word could move markets, turned his full attention to the woman he was supposed to marry. Mira Martinez is not the help, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium. She is the most extraordinary woman I have ever known. She brought my nephew back from the edge of despair when no one else could reach him. She fills our home with laughter and warmth. She challenges me to be better than I ever thought possible. Myra's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was happening. Matthias was destroying his reputation, his engagement, his carefully constructed world, all for her. And somewhere along the way, Matthias continued, his eyes finding Myra's across the crowded room, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with her. The gasps were audible now. Phones appeared as people began recording what would become the social scandal of the season. Vanessa's face had gone white with rage and humiliation. Mira, Matthias said, his voice softer but still carrying in the stunned silence, I know I have no right to ask, but would you do me the honor of being my wife? The auditorium erupted. Some applauded, caught up in the romance of the moment. Others buzzed with shock and disapproval. Vanessa stormed out, her family following in a wake of outraged dignity. Mira stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Part of her soared at his words, at the public declaration of love she'd never dared to dream of. But another part recoiled at the spectacle, at having their private feelings exposed to a room full of strangers who would judge and dissect every detail. Matthias, she whispered, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Finn, still on stage, looked between them with wide eyes before breaking into the biggest smile Mira had ever seen. He began clapping, and gradually other children joined him, their innocent joy cutting through the adult complications. But Mira couldn't stay. The weight of every stare, the magnitude of what had just happened, the knowledge that their private world had been shattered forever, it was too much. She turned and fled, pushing through the crowd that parted before her like she carried some contagious scandal. Matthias called her name, but she was already gone, leaving behind a room full of whispers and a man who had just sacrificed everything for love. That night, the story exploded across social media. Billionaire dumps fiancé for nanny at school event, dominated headlines. Myra's phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters, her address somehow leaked, and photographers were camping outside her building. She sat in her small apartment, still in her simple dress, staring at the engagement ring Matthias had somehow managed to slip into her purse during the chaos. It was beautiful, not ostentatious like she'd expected, but perfectly suited to her tastes. Even in his impulsive moment, he'd known her completely. The aftermath was swift and brutal. By morning, Myra's building was surrounded by paparazzi, their cameras clicking incessantly as they waited for any glimpse of the woman who had stolen Matthias Kane. She hadn't left her apartment in 3 days, surviving on whatever food she'd had in her pantry and the kindness of her elderly neighbor who brought groceries. The media painted her as everything from a gold-digging seductress to an innocent victim, but none of the narratives felt like her truth. She was simply a woman who had fallen in love with the wrong man at the wrong time, and now everyone was paying the price. Her phone buzzed constantly, reporters, distant relatives suddenly interested in reconnecting, and friends from her old life who wanted details. But the call she hoped for never came. Matthias's number had been disconnected, likely changed to manage his own media storm. Most heartbreaking were Finn's attempts to reach her. She'd see his little face peering out of the mansion's windows when photographers caught glimpses of the property. His drawings, smuggled out by sympathetic staff, appeared under her door, pictures of the three of them together, holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Meanwhile, Matthias faced a reckoning of his own. The Kane Industries board called an emergency meeting within hours of the showcase incident. The merger with Vanessa's family empire, worth nearly $2 billion, was officially dead. Stock prices plummeted as investors lost confidence in his judgment. "You've lost your mind," his uncle Marcus said, pacing the boardroom like a caged animal. 20 years building this empire, and you throw it away for a woman you've known 6 months? Matthias sat at the head of the massive conference table, looking strangely calm despite the chaos surrounding him. "I built this empire to provide for my family. Finn is my family. Mira makes him happy in ways I never could. That boy will be happy with any number of qualified nannies," Margaret, his aunt, interjected. "But he won't be happy growing up poor because you've destroyed the family fortune." The numbers were staggering. Beyond the failed merger, 3 major clients had already pulled their accounts, citing concerns about leadership stability. The family's social circle had closed ranks, invitations to galas and charity events mysteriously disappearing. But it was Finn's deterioration that truly broke Matthias's heart. The boy had retreated into himself again, refusing to eat, barely speaking. He'd ask for Mira every day, and Matthias had no answers that satisfied either of them. "She left because of what I did," Matthias told him one evening as they sat in Finn's room. "I put her in an impossible position." "But you love her," Finn said, his voice small but certain. "And she loves us. Why can't love fix everything?" It was the question that haunted Matthias's sleepless nights. In business, problems had solutions. Money could solve most obstacles. But love existed in a realm where his usual tools were useless. Dr. Sarah Chin, Finn's therapist, delivered the harsh truth during their emergency session. He's regressing because his world has been upended again. First he lost his parents, then he found safety with Mira, and now she's gone too. In his mind, love equals loss. What do I do? Matthias asked, the powerful CO reduced to a desperate guardian seeking guidance. You need to decide what's more important, your reputation or his healing. Because right now you can't have both. Mira meanwhile was fighting her own battles. The media attention had cost her any chance of finding new employment. No family wanted to hire the nanny who'd caused such a scandal. Her savings dwindled rapidly as she paid photographers to stop following her, hired a lawyer to manage cease and desist orders, and covered her grandmother's increasing medical bills. She found temporary work at a coffee shop in a different neighborhood, where the owner took pity on her situation. The early morning shifts helped her avoid most of the media attention, but she could feel the weight of her changed circumstances with every dollar she counted, every bill she couldn't quite cover. Her sister called from California, worried and confused. The whole thing sounds like a fairy tale. A rich guy falls for a poor girl, professes his love publicly. Why aren't you happy? Because fairy tales don't have media storms and financial ruin, Mira replied wearily. Because real love shouldn't destroy everything it touches. The hardest moments came when she let herself remember Matthias's laugh when she challenged his business theories, the way he looked when he watched Finn sleep peacefully, the tender kiss they'd shared in the mansion's garden when they thought no one was watching. She still wore his ring sometimes in the privacy of her apartment, wondering if she'd made the right choice in running. But then she'd see another headline about his family's financial troubles, another photo of Finn looking lost and withdrawn, and she'd know that loving him meant staying away. 3 weeks after the showcase, Matthias made a decision that shocked even his harshest critics. He liquidated a significant portion of his personal assets, not to save the business deals, but to create a trust fund that would ensure Finn's future regardless of what happened to Kane Industries. You're giving up, Marcus accused. I'm choosing what matters, Matthias corrected. I spent so long trying to honor my brother's memory by building wealth that I forgot to honor it by loving his son. He began scaling back his work schedule, turning down lucrative contracts that would require extensive travel. His penthouse office, once a shrine to his ambition, felt increasingly like a prison. The society pages delighted in chronicling his fall from grace. Vanessa gave carefully crafted interviews about their amicable split, painting herself as the refined woman who'd escaped a man who'd clearly suffered some kind of breakdown. But Matthias found something unexpected in his exile from high society: relief. For the first time in years, he could breathe without the weight of constant expectation. He started cooking dinner for Finn instead of relying on staff. They read together in the evenings, real conversations replacing the stilted exchanges that had defined their relationship. Still, the mansion felt empty without Mira's laughter echoing through its halls. Finn asked for her constantly, and Matthias had no answers that satisfied either of them. He'd sent letters through intermediaries, flowers that were returned, messages that went unanswered. 2 months after the showcase disaster, Matthias Kane did something unprecedented. He took the bus. Not as a publicity stunt or corporate social responsibility photo op, but because his driver had quit after paparazzi made his life impossible, and Matthias needed to get to Myra's neighborhood without causing another media circus. He'd spent weeks learning about her world, the community center where she volunteered, the small market where she shopped, the coffee shop where she now worked early morning shifts. Not to intrude, but to understand the life she'd built apart from his wealth and chaos. Mira spotted him through the coffee shop window on a Tuesday morning, looking oddly out of place in jeans and a simple sweater, studying the bus schedule like it was a complex financial document. For a moment, her heart stopped. Then anger flared. How dare he invade her refuge? But when she stepped outside during her break, ready to tell him to leave, she saw something that stopped her cold. Matthias was sitting on the bench, not waiting for her, not trying to corner her into conversation. He was simply reading to an elderly homeless man who frequented the area, sharing his coffee and a box of pastries from the shop. Mr. Gerald was telling me about his time in the Merchant Marine, Matthias said when he noticed her approach, his voice carefully neutral. Fascinating stories about navigating storms. Gerald beamed, clearly enjoying the attention. This young man's got good questions. Not many people want to hear about the old days. Mira watched, confused, as Matthias continued their conversation with genuine interest, no trace of the condescension she might have expected. When Gerald excused himself to catch the noon meal at the shelter, Matthias made no move to approach her. "What are you doing here?" she finally asked. "Learning," Matthias replied simply. "You told me once that I didn't understand how most people lived. You were right." Over the following weeks, this became their pattern. Matthias would appear in her neighborhood, not seeking her out but simply existing in her world. He volunteered at the community center where she helped with after-school programs. He learned to navigate public transportation, to shop at discount groceries, to find joy in simple pleasures. Mira watched from a distance, skeptical at first. This had to be an act, a wealthy man playing at poverty to win her back. But as days turned to weeks, she began to see something genuine in his transformation. "He's different," her coworker Maria observed one morning as they prepared coffee. "Rich guys who slum it for attention? They last maybe a week. This one's been here a month, and yesterday I saw him helping Mrs. Rodriguez translate her medical bills. No cameras, no audience." The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening. Mira was leaving the community center after tutoring sessions when she found Matthias in the parking lot, soaked and frustrated, staring at his phone. "Car trouble?" she asked despite herself. "Bus broke down. Last one doesn't run for another hour." He looked up at her, rainwater dripping from his hair. "I was supposed to pick up Finn from his therapy session." Without thinking, Mira pulled out her own phone. "I'll call you a cab." "Mira, wait." His voice was soft, almost broken. "I know you don't want to see me, but could you just tell me how he's doing?" "Really doing?" The pain in his voice was raw, honest. This wasn't the calculating businessman or the charming society figure. This was a man who'd lost everything that mattered and was trying to find his way back. "He misses you," she said quietly. "Both of us. But he's stronger now than when I first met him. The therapy is helping." "I ruined everything," Matthias said, his composure finally cracking. "I was really being selfish again. I wanted everyone to know you were mine without asking if that's what you wanted." The admission hung between them in the rain. Mira had spent months angry about his public declaration, but hearing him acknowledge its selfishness was somehow more painful than the humiliation had been. "Why are you here, Matthias?" "Really?" "Because I need to prove that what I said was true. Not just the loving you part, the part about you making me better." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he'd lost, the signs of a man who'd been living on coffee and regret. "I've spent my whole life believing that money could buy happiness, that success meant accumulation. You showed me what actually matters." "And what's that?" "Connection. Purpose. Being present for the people you love instead of providing for them from a distance." His smile was sad but genuine. "It took losing everything to realize I'd been empty for years. The showcase wasn't when I fell in love with you, Mira. It was just when I finally admitted it to myself." A taxi pulled up, summoned by Mira's call. Matthias looked at it, then back at her. "I don't want you to take me back," he said quietly. "I want to earn the right to ask someday. I want to become the man who deserves your love, not just the one who needs it." As he got into the taxi, Mira felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she'd built to protect herself from the impossibility of their situation began to develop tiny cracks. Over the next month, she heard stories from others. How Matthias had quietly paid for Mr. Gerald's medical treatment, how he'd donated to the community center without fanfare, how he'd started a scholarship fund for kids like Finn who'd lost parents. More importantly, she saw the changes in Finn during their secret visits. Matthias had arranged for her to see the boy privately at Dr. Chen's office, away from media attention. Finn was healing, slowly but surely, and much of that healing came from having an uncle who was finally, truly present. "He reads to me every night now," Finn told her during one visit. "Not just the stories he used to read but new ones. And he makes funny voices for all the characters." "That's wonderful," Mira said, her heart aching with how much she'd missed them both. "He asks about you sometimes," Finn continued innocently. "If you're happy, if you miss us." I told him yes to the missing part. "Was that okay?" Mira hugged him close, breathing in his familiar scent of childhood and hope. "That was more than okay, sweetheart." But it was seeing Matthias at the community center's fundraiser that finally broke through her remaining defenses. She'd come to help serve dinner to families in need, never expecting to find him there, not as a donor or a photo opportunity, but serving food alongside other volunteers. He moved with quiet efficiency, listening to an elderly woman's stories about her late husband, helping a young father navigate the application for housing assistance, treating everyone with the same respect he'd once reserved for board members and business partners. When their eyes met across the room, he didn't approach. He simply nodded, a small acknowledgement that carried more weight than any grand gesture. He was keeping his promise, not asking her to come back, but proving every day that he was becoming worthy of being asked to stay. That night, Mira sat in her apartment with Matthias's ring in her palm, finally allowing herself to imagine a different ending to their story. Not the fairy tale version where love conquered all instantly, but the real version where love did the hard work of transformation, where people chose to become better for each other. For the first time since the showcase, she began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. Not as the broken man and desperate woman they'd been, but as the people they were becoming, stronger, wiser, and worthy of the love they'd been too afraid to fully claim. The ring caught the light from her window, a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Outside, life continued in its messy, beautiful complexity, and Mira finally felt ready to step back into it, whatever that might mean for her future with the man who'd loved her enough to let her go. Mira and Matthias's story proves that real love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day and doing the work to become worthy of someone's heart. What do you think makes a relationship worth fighting for? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoy this story, kindly subscribe, like, and share. Make sure to turn on notifications because there is more from where this came from. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.